He moved through the lobby of Halston Tower with his head down, hands gripping the cleaning cart as though he were trying to apologize for breathing the same air as the executives who passed him without a glance. In a skyscraper built on innovation and billion-dollar deals, where board meetings decided the future of entire industries, there was a man nobody saw. A man invisible in a kingdom of glass and ambition. And yet it was him, Marcus Lane, who would do what no specialist, no therapist, no million-dollar program could accomplish. Because the little girl everyone in that building feared, the only daughter of billionaire tech mogul Victoria Halston, was unreachable. That girl, Lily Halston, had once been the heartbeat of the entire company. Now there was only silence. 6 nannies had quit. 2 refused to finish their contracts. Therapists from 3 different states had tried and failed. She screamed when anyone offered comfort, hid from every touch, and locked herself behind walls no one could see through. Until one afternoon when Marcus was wiping down the lobby railings near the executive elevators and heard a soft, strangled sob coming from behind a column. He stopped. Set down his cleaning rag. And walked closer, slowly, carefully, as if approaching something fragile and wild. Then he knelt down, not too close, not too far, and reached into his pocket. From it, he pulled a small crocheted bluebird, handmade and slightly lopsided, soft around the edges from being held. And then, miraculously, the girl stopped crying. No one in the building knew what had just happened. No one knew that the man pushing the cleaning cart had once been a loving father, until he lost everything. And Victoria Halston, the brilliant CEO who controlled empires, was about to witness something that would shatter and rebuild her world. If you believe that broken people can still save each other, stay with this story. Hit subscribe so you won't miss the next part of the story, because tell me, a man who's lost everything, can he really save a child who's losing herself on the 30th floor of Pierce Global Dynamics in the heart of Manhattan? The glass walls reflected the light of the entire city below in a silence so deep she could hear her own heartbeat, because sometimes the ones who've lost everything are the only ones who know how to help you find what's left. On the 43rd floor of Halston Tower, where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering chaos of the city below, Victoria Halston stood alone in her corner office, her breath fogging the glass. In the stillness, she could hear nothing but the faint hum of the ventilation system and the pounding of her own heart. On her desk sat the 8th behavioral assessment for her daughter. Patient exhibits extreme avoidance behaviors. Nonverbal for 87 of the last 90 days. Severe trauma response. No improvement with cognitive therapy or play-based interventions. Recommend inpatient psychiatric evaluation. Victoria closed the file slowly. Not again. At 44, she was the CEO of a $4.7 billion technology empire. She commanded 1,400 employees, negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions, and had been named one of the most powerful women in tech 3 years running. She made decisions that affected millions of lives across continents. And yet she stood powerless before a 7-year-old child. 3 months earlier, Robert Halston, her husband, her partner, and Lily's entire world, had died when his helicopter went down during a storm off the coast. Since that night, Lily had become a ghost. Those eyes, only 7 years old, carried a kind of emptiness most adults would never survive. Before the crash, Lily had been the light of Halston Tower. She'd run through the office hallways in light-up sneakers, waving at employees who melted at the sight of her. She'd burst into her mother's office holding a crayon drawing. "Mommy, look! I drew us, all 3 of us." Robert had laughed, swept her into his arms, and spun her until she squealed, "You know your mom runs the whole world, right?" Lily had giggled. "But Daddy's the funniest." Their laughter had filled every corner of that office. Now there was only the hum of machines and the sterile scent of expensive furniture. Victoria opened the adjoining room, the private playroom designed specifically for Lily. Soft lighting. Plush rugs. Walls lined with books and toys chosen by child psychologists. Cameras discreetly positioned in every corner for safety. In the far corner, Lily sat curled up on the floor, clutching a stuffed rabbit, the last gift her father had given her. "Lily, sweetheart," Victoria knelt down, forcing her voice to stay steady. "Today we're going to meet someone new. She's a very kind doctor who—" "No." The scream tore through the room like shattered glass. "I don't want any more doctors. I want Daddy back." The rabbit flew across the room and hit the wall. Victoria froze, her hands trembling in midair. A woman who could command boardrooms and negotiate with world leaders didn't know how to hold her own daughter. The child had built a fortress around herself. And no matter how powerful Victoria Halston was, she couldn't find the door. But to understand why Marcus Lane could do what no one else could, you have to go back 3 years, to the night that destroyed him. The apartment in Jackson Heights was small. Not cozy small. Just small. The kind of place where the kitchen barely fit one person and the shower dripped no matter how many times you tightened the faucet. The walls were a faded cream color that might have been white once, and the carpet near the door had worn thin from years of other people's footsteps. Marcus didn't mind. He wasn't trying to build a life here. He was just trying to survive one. Every night when he came home, he followed the same routine. Keys on the counter. Shoes by the door. Jacket hung on the back of the single chair. Then he'd stand in the narrow hallway and stare at the sliding wooden door at the end. The one he could never quite bring himself to open. But he always paused there. Always whispered the same words into the silence, "Good night, buddy." Behind that door was a room no bigger than a closet. Inside, taped to the walls with yellowing Scotch tape, were photos. A boy with sandy hair and a gap-toothed smile. A Little League jersey with the number 7. A birthday cake shaped like a rocket ship, frosting smeared across a laughing face. A popsicle stick airplane held together with glue and hope. Tommy. Marcus had been a different man once. 3 years ago, he'd been an art teacher at Riverside High, the kind who stayed late to help students finish projects and kept a drawer full of extra supplies for kids who couldn't afford their own. His wife, Hannah, worked night shifts at Queen's General Hospital. Their life was tight, money always seemed to slip through their fingers faster than they could catch it, but it was full. Full of laughter. Full of love. Full of a 6-year-old boy who collected every toy his father made him. Marcus built things out of whatever he could find. Yarn. Bottle caps. Cardboard. Popsicle sticks. He'd sit at the kitchen table after Tommy went to bed, his hands busy, his heart light, crafting small wonders for his son to discover in the morning. Tommy kept every single one. Lined them up on his bedroom shelf like they were treasures. "Dad makes the best toys in the whole world," he'd tell anyone who'd listen. And Marcus would ruffle his hair and say, "That's because you're the best kid in the whole world." It was a simple life. A good life. Until one November morning when everything shattered. The roads were icy. Marcus had told Tommy to be careful walking to the bus stop. Hannah had already left for her shift. Marcus was running late for a faculty meeting. He'd kissed Tommy on the forehead, handed him his backpack, and watched him walk down the driveway. "Love you, Dad. Love you too, buddy. See you after school." Those were the last words they ever exchanged. The truck driver said he didn't see the boy step into the street. Said the ice made it impossible to stop. Said it happened so fast. The phone call came during second period. Marcus remembered the principal's face when she pulled him out of class. Remembered the way the fluorescent lights seemed too bright. Remembered collapsing in the hospital hallway when the doctor said the words that made the world stop spinning. "I'm so sorry. We did everything we could." Tommy was gone. Hannah tried to hold them together. She went back to work after 2 weeks because they needed the insurance, needed the routine, needed something to keep the walls from closing in. But grief carved them out in different ways. Marcus couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. Couldn't walk into Tommy's room without feeling like his chest was caving in. Hannah stopped talking. stopped crying. Just moved through the house like a ghost, her eyes hollow, her hands shaking whenever she tried to hold anything that had been Tommy's. They tried. They went to grief counseling. They held each other in the dark. They whispered promises that tomorrow would be easier. But it never was. 6 months after Tommy's funeral, Marcus came home to an empty house and a note on the kitchen table that I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry. Please don't look for me. Hannah was gone. No forwarding address. No phone number. Just gone. And Marcus understood. Because part of him wanted to disappear too. He sold the house 3 weeks later. Couldn't stand walking past Tommy's empty room. Couldn't stand the neighbors' pitying looks. Couldn't stand being the man who used to have a son. He quit teaching. The thought of standing in front of students, pretending to care about art projects and college applications, made him feel like a fraud. How could he teach kids to create when he couldn't even hold himself together? He took the first job that didn't require him to explain himself. A janitorial position through a staffing agency. Late shifts. Minimal interaction. No one asking how he was doing or telling him that time heals all wounds. Cleaning floors felt safe. Predictable. Invisible. No one expected anything from you when you were invisible. No one asked questions. No one needed you to be whole. You just pushed your cart, wiped down surfaces, and disappeared into the background of other people's important lives. The pain was easier that way. When no one was watching. Marcus learned to keep his head down. Learned to move through spaces without disturbing them. Learned to make himself small enough that the world forgot he existed. And for 2 years, that's exactly what he did. He showed up. He cleaned. He went home. He stood outside that sliding door and whispered goodnight to a boy who'd never answer. It was a kind of survival. Not living. Just surviving. He never imagined that would ever change. But standing in his apartment that night, Marcus pulled the crocheted bluebird from his pocket, the one Lily Halston had held like a lifeline, and stared at it under the dim kitchen light. He'd made it 6 months ago, the way he still made toys late at night when the grief got too heavy. His hands needed to move. Needed to create something, even if no one would ever see it. Except someone had. And for the first time in 3 years, Marcus felt something other than emptiness. He didn't know it yet, but that small crocheted bird had already begun to change everything. Because sometimes, the only way to climb out of your own darkness is to hold a light for someone else. And Lily Halston was about to teach Marcus Lane how to live again. Marcus arrived at Halston Tower the next afternoon the same way he always did, through the service entrance, badge clipped to his shirt, head down, cart rolling quietly across the polished floor. He didn't expect anything to be different. Didn't expect the world to have shifted overnight. But when he turned the corner near the lobby elevators, he saw her. Lily Halston stood at the bottom of the grand staircase, small and still, clutching the crocheted bluebird against her chest. She wore a pale yellow dress and white sneakers. Her dark hair was pulled back with a clip. And her eyes, those haunted, hollow eyes, were fixed directly on him. Marcus stopped. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, carefully, Lily walked toward him. Not with confidence. Not with certainty. But with the kind of fragile determination that comes from gathering every ounce of courage you have left. She didn't say anything. She just sat down on the floor beside his cleaning cart, crossed her legs, and held the bird a little tighter. Marcus set down the spray bottle he'd been holding. His heart was pounding, but he kept his movements slow. Steady. He knelt down a few feet away from her, not close enough to feel intrusive, and pulled a small bottle cap from his pocket, blue plastic, worn smooth around the edges. He placed it on the floor between them. This, Marcus said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper, belonged to a tiny explorer named Finn. Lily's eyes shifted to the bottle cap. She didn't move. didn't speak. But she was listening. Finn wanted to learn how to float, Marcus continued, turning the cap gently with one finger. He'd watched the big boats sail across the water and thought, if they can do it, so can I. So one day, he set out on his very first adventure. Marcus paused, letting the silence settle. Somewhere above them, the hum of the building continued, phones ringing, elevator doors chiming, voices echoing through the halls. But down here, in this quiet corner of the lobby, the world felt smaller. Safer. What happened to him? The words were so soft Marcus almost didn't hear them. But he did. Lily had spoken. For the first time in 90 days, she had used her voice. Marcus looked at her, and something inside his chest cracked open. He didn't smile, didn't want to make too much of the moment and scare her back into silence. He just nodded, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. Well, he said gently, Finn discovered that floating wasn't about being the biggest or the strongest. It was about learning to trust the water. And once he figured that out, he went everywhere. Lily stared at the bottle cap for a long moment. Then, still holding the bird, she reached out and touched it with one finger. Marcus stayed perfectly still, and somewhere on the 32nd floor, in a surveillance room lined with monitors, 2 security guards stared at the screen in stunned silence. Is that? Yeah. That's her. She's talking. One of them grabbed the phone. By the time Victoria Halston reached the lobby, a small crowd had gathered near the observation windows overlooking the atrium. Executives. Assistants. Junior analysts who'd heard the whispers spreading through the building like wildfire. The Halston girl is downstairs. She's with the janitor. She spoke. Victoria pushed through the cluster of onlookers, her heels clicking sharply against the marble, her breath caught somewhere between hope and disbelief. When she reached the glass, she stopped. Below, in the center of the vast lobby, her daughter sat cross-legged on the floor beside Marcus Lane. They weren't touching. Weren't even looking at each other. But there was something in the way Lily leaned slightly toward him, something in the way her shoulders had loosened, just a fraction, that made Victoria's throat tighten. "Ma'am," one of her assistants whispered, "should we?" "No," Victoria's voice was firm. "Don't interrupt." She stood there, watching, as Marcus placed something else on the floor. A small wooden bead. Then another, and slowly, carefully, Lily began arranging them in a line. No one in the building dared to move. The next day, Lily came back. 3 o'clock. Same spot. Same quiet determination. Marcus was ready. He'd brought a piece of smooth driftwood he'd found years ago, sanded down and tucked away in a drawer. He set it between them without a word. This, he said, was part of a ship that sailed farther than anyone thought possible. Lily picked it up, ran her fingers along the grain. Where did it go? Everywhere it was afraid to. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Marcus saw the question she couldn't quite ask yet. How do you stop being afraid? He didn't have an answer. Not one that would fix anything. So he just stayed. By the end of the week, a rhythm had formed. Every day at 3 o'clock, Lily left her guarded playroom and found Marcus somewhere in the building. Sometimes in the lobby. Sometimes near the executive lounge. Once, in the stairwell between the 14th and 15th floors. She never announced herself. Just appeared, holding the crocheted bird, and sat down wherever he was working. And Marcus always had something for her. An acorn. A piece of sea glass. A button shaped like a star. Small, ordinary things that became extraordinary in his hands. He'd tell her stories. Quiet, gentle stories about brave explorers and clever foxes and rivers that learned to sing. And Lily would listen, her eyes a little less distant each time, her voice a little steadier when she asked her small, careful questions. Why did the fox leave? Where does the river go? Does the explorer ever get scared? And Marcus would answer honestly. Yes. All the time. But he keeps going anyway. The crocheted bird never left her hands. She carried it everywhere, her fingers wrapped around it like a talisman. Like proof that someone understood. On the seventh day, Victoria sat alone in her office long after the building had emptied. The city glittered below, indifferent and infinite. On her screen, she replayed the surveillance footage from that first afternoon, the moment Marcus had knelt down, the moment Lily had spoken. She watched it 3 times. The first time, she cried. The second time, she felt something she hadn't felt in months, hope. The third time, she made a decision. Marcus Lane wasn't just a janitor. He was the first person in 3 months who'd been able to reach her daughter. And Victoria Halston didn't care what anyone thought about it. She was going to make sure he stayed. Victoria found him on the 18th floor, polishing the brass railings near the conference rooms. It was past 7 in the evening. Most of the building had emptied out, leaving only the hum of the ventilation system and the distant ping of elevator bells. Marcus saw her approaching and straightened, his grip tightening on the cleaning cloth. In all his time at Halston Tower, the CEO had never spoken to him. Never looked in his direction. People like Victoria Halston didn't notice people like him. But she was walking toward him now with purpose, her heels echoing through the empty corridor, her expression unreadable. Mr. Lane. Her voice was calm. Controlled. But Marcus could hear something underneath it, something fragile trying not to break. Yes, ma'am. He set down the cloth and stood with his hands at his sides, waiting. Victoria stopped a few feet away, her arms crossed, her eyes studying him with an intensity that made him want to look away. But he didn't. Something told him that would be a mistake. I need to understand something, she said quietly. My daughter hasn't spoken in 3 months. 6 trained professionals couldn't reach her. And yet she sits with you every day at 3 o'clock and talks about bottle caps and explorers. She paused, her jaw tightening. So I'm asking you directly, why you? What is it about you that makes her feel safe? Marcus didn't answer right away. He thought about lying. Thought about shrugging it off as coincidence or luck. But the look in Victoria Halston's eyes told him she'd see through anything less than the truth. Because I know what it's like to lose a child. The words hung in the air between them. Victoria's expression shifted, just barely, but enough for Marcus to see the armor crack. Her arms loosened. Her breath caught. What? 3 years ago, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the way his hand started to tremble, my son was hit by a truck on his way to school. He was 6 years old. His name was Tommy. Victoria stood frozen, her eyes wide, her composure unraveling in real time. I'm so sorry. Marcus nodded slowly. My wife left 6 months after he died. Couldn't handle the grief. I don't blame her. I could barely handle it either. He met Victoria's gaze. I took this job because it didn't require me to be whole. Didn't require me to pretend I was okay. I could just exist. Invisible. Until your daughter found me. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Victoria's voice came out barely above a whisper. She found you because she recognized it. Recognized what? The grief. Victoria's eyes glistened, and she looked away, staring at the glass walls overlooking the darkened city. She sees it in me too. I try to hide it. Try to be strong for her. But children know. They always know. Marcus stayed quiet, giving her space. Victoria's shoulders sagged, and suddenly she didn't look like a billionaire CEO. She just looked like a mother drowning. Robert died 3 months ago. Helicopter crash off the coast during a storm. He was coming back from a meeting in Boston. Her voice cracked. Lily was waiting for him at home. She'd made him a card. Welcome home, Daddy. She never got to give it to him. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, and he meant it. No parent should have to survive that. Victoria turned back to him, tears streaking down her face now, unchecked. "How do you do it? How do you keep going when everything inside you is broken?" Marcus thought about Tommy's room. About the toys he still made in the middle of the night. About the way he whispered goodnight to a boy who'd never answer. "You don't keep going because you're strong," he said quietly. "You keep going because stopping would mean they're really gone. And as long as you're still here, they're still part of you." Victoria covered her mouth with her hand and nodded, unable to speak. They stood there in the empty hallway, two people bound by the worst kind of understanding. Grief recognizing grief. Finally, Victoria wiped her eyes and straightened, pulling herself back together piece by piece. "Thank you," she said, her voice raw but steady. "For helping her. For seeing her when no one else could." "She's easy to see," Marcus said. "She's brave." Victoria almost smiled. Almost. "She gets that from her father." But not everyone saw it the way Victoria did. By the end of the week, whispers had started circulating through the upper floors. Quiet at first. A raised eyebrow here. A murmured comment there. Then louder. "Did you hear the CEO is letting the janitor spend time with her daughter? Apparently the girl won't talk to anyone else. Don't you think that's strange? Has anyone actually vetted this guy?" In the executive break room, two senior managers stood by the coffee machine, their voices low but sharp. "I'm just saying, it's a liability," one of them muttered. "We don't know anything about him." "She's grieving," the other replied. "She's not thinking clearly." "Exactly. Which is why someone needs to step in before this becomes a problem." On the 29th floor, the HR director received an anonymous email questioning Marcus's background check. On the 31st, a board member called Victoria's assistant asking pointed questions about security protocols regarding non-essential personnel. And in a corner office on the 40th floor, Edward Crane, Halston's chief operating officer and the longest-serving member of the executive board, sat watching surveillance footage of Lily and Marcus in the lobby. His expression was cold. Calculating. "Pull his file," he said to his assistant without looking away from the screen. "Everything. Employment history. Criminal record. Financial background. I want to know who Marcus Lane really is." The assistant hesitated. "Sir, Miss Halston has made it clear she—" "I don't care what she's made clear." Crane's voice was ice. "Victoria's judgment is compromised. Someone has to protect this company. And if that means protecting it from her, so be it." He leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving the screen where a little girl sat beside a janitor, holding a crocheted bird. "There's something off about this," Crane muttered. "And I'm going to find out what." 3 floors below, Marcus finished his shift and packed up his cart, unaware that he'd become the subject of scrutiny. Unaware that lines were being drawn. Unaware that the simple act of kindness he'd shown a grieving child was about to ignite a battle he never asked for. All he knew was that tomorrow at 3 o'clock, Lily would be waiting. And for the first time in 3 years, that felt like enough. But storms don't announce themselves. They just arrive. And this one was already gathering strength. The emergency board meeting was called for 8 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. Victoria wasn't invited. 7 members of Halston's executive board sat around the mahogany table in the West Conference Room, their faces grim, their voices hushed. Edward Crane stood at the head, arms crossed, a tablet glowing in front of him. "We have a situation," he began, his tone clipped and deliberate. "And it's escalating faster than anyone anticipated." He tapped the screen, and a surveillance photo appeared on the wall-mounted display. Marcus Lane kneeling beside Lily Halston in the lobby. Her small hand reaching toward a bottle cap. His face gentle and unguarded. "This man," Crane continued, "has unfettered access to the CEO's 7-year-old daughter. No formal vetting. No psychological evaluation. No professional credentials of any kind. He's a janitor, someone muttered. Exactly. Crane's eyes swept the room. A janitor with a tragic past. A man who lost his child and whose wife abandoned him. I'm not saying he's dangerous. I'm saying we don't know if he's dangerous. And that's the problem. Margaret Chen, the CFO, leaned forward. Victoria trusts him. The girl is responding to him. Isn't that what matters? What matters, Crane shot back, is that if something goes wrong, anything, this company will be torn apart. Lawsuits. Investigations. Public relations nightmare. We're talking about the daughter of a billionaire being cared for by someone we know nothing about. We know he passed a background check, another board member offered weakly. Crane scoffed. A background check for a custodial position. Not for someone who's essentially acting as an unlicensed therapist to a traumatized child. He paused, letting the words land. Victoria's judgment is compromised. She's grieving. She's desperate. And desperation makes people reckless. The room fell silent. So what are you suggesting? Chen asked. Crane's expression hardened. I'm suggesting we intervene before this becomes a scandal we can't control. It might already be too late for that, someone said quietly. Crane turned. What do you mean? The director of communications, a woman named Stephanie Ford, slid her phone across the table. On the screen was a news headline from a tabloid site. Billionaire CEO lets janitor handle grieving daughter, desperation or dangerous judgment. Crane's jaw tightened. When did this go live? 20 minutes ago. How did they? Anonymous tip. Ford's voice was flat. Someone inside the building talked. The room erupted in murmurs. Crane silenced them with a raised hand. This is exactly what I warned you about, he said coldly. And if we don't act now, it's going to get worse. By noon, the story had spread to 3 more outlets. By 2 o'clock, camera crews were parked outside Halston Tower. And by 3:15, 2 police officers walked through the front doors. Marcus was in the lobby when they arrived, setting up his cart near the elevators. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor a few feet away, arranging a small collection of stones he'd given her. Excuse me, one of the officers said, his tone professional but firm. Are you Marcus Lane? Marcus looked up, confusion flickering across his face. Yes. Is there a problem? We need to ask you a few questions. The officer gestured toward the security office. If you could come with us, please. Marcus's stomach dropped. What's this about? We received a complaint regarding your interactions with a minor. The words hit like a punch to the chest. Lily's head snapped up. Her eyes went wide. What? It's okay, Marcus said quickly, his voice shaking. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. But Lily was already on her feet, the stones scattering across the floor. No. No, you can't take him. Lily. He didn't do anything wrong. Her voice cracked, rising in panic. She ran to Marcus and grabbed his arm, clutching the crocheted bird against her chest. Please don't take him. Please. He's the only one who. Her words dissolved into sobs. Marcus knelt down, his hands hovering near her but not touching, not wanting to make things worse. Lily, it's okay. I'm not going anywhere. I promise. Step back from the child, sir, the second officer said, his hand moving toward his belt. He's not hurting me. Lily screamed, her small body shaking. Why doesn't anyone understand? He's helping me. A crowd had gathered. Employees lined the upper balconies, phones out, cameras recording. Security guards stood frozen, unsure whether to intervene. And then, cutting through the chaos like a blade, came Victoria Halston's voice. What the hell is going on here? She strode across the lobby, her heels striking the marble like gunfire. Her expression was pure fury. The officers turned, startled. "Ma'am, we're responding to a complaint." "A complaint about what, exactly?" Victoria's voice was ice. "Inappropriate conduct with a minor." Victoria's eyes flashed. "Inappropriate conduct." She repeated the words slowly, dangerously. "Let me make something very clear, officers. That man has done nothing inappropriate. He has shown my daughter more compassion, more understanding, and more genuine care than anyone in this entire building. Including me. Ms. Halston, we're just doing our job." "Your job?" Victoria stepped closer, her voice dropping but losing none of its edge. "Your job is to protect children. So let me tell you what's protecting my child right now, Marcus Lane. He's the reason she's speaking again. The reason she gets out of bed. The reason I still have hope that she'll survive this grief." She turned to Marcus, and her expression softened just enough to show the desperation underneath. "Don't you dare leave. Do you hear me? You're the only thing keeping her afloat." Marcus's throat tightened. "Ms. Halston." "No," her voice was firm. "I don't care what anyone says. I don't care what the board thinks or what the media writes. My daughter needs you. And I will not let anyone take that away from her." She turned back to the officers. "Now, unless you have an actual charge to file, one based on evidence rather than gossip, I suggest you leave my building." The officers exchanged glances. One of them cleared his throat. "We'll need to file a report." "File whatever you need. But you're done here." They hesitated, then nodded and turned toward the exit. The lobby remained silent as they left. Lily still clung to Marcus, her face buried against his shoulder, her small body trembling. Victoria knelt down beside them, her own hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. "Lily, sweetheart," she whispered. "It's okay. He's not going anywhere." Lily pulled back just enough to look at her mother, tears streaming down her face. "Promise?" Victoria looked at Marcus. And Marcus, despite everything inside him screaming that he should walk away before he caused more damage, nodded. "I promise," he said quietly. Later that evening, after the building had emptied and the camera crews had finally dispersed, Marcus stood in Victoria's office. The city stretched out below them, glittering and indifferent. "I should quit," Marcus said, his voice hollow. "This is only going to get worse." "No," Victoria's response was immediate. "Absolute. You saw what happened today. I saw my daughter fight for someone she trusts. I saw her speak up when she's been silent for months. I saw her fight, Marcus. Do you understand what that means?" Marcus looked at her, his chest tight. "It means she's not giving up," Victoria continued, her voice breaking. "And neither am I. So whatever comes next, whatever they throw at us, we face it. Together." Marcus wanted to argue. Wanted to tell her he wasn't worth the fight. But when he closed his eyes, he saw Lily's face. Heard her voice. "Please don't take him." And he realized he couldn't walk away from her any more than he could walk away from Tommy's memory. "Okay," he whispered. Victoria nodded, relief flooding her features. Neither of them knew that the worst was still ahead. But for now, they'd survived the first storm. And that would have to be enough. For 3 days after the incident with the police, a fragile calm settled over Halston Tower. The media attention faded. The board meetings quieted. Marcus continued his shifts, and Lily continued appearing at 3 o'clock, her crocheted bird always in hand. It almost felt like things might be okay. Then came Thursday evening. Marcus was restocking supplies in the janitorial closet on the 12th floor when his phone rang. An unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Hello? Mr. Lane?" The voice on the other end was frantic, breathless. "This is Diane, I'm Lily's nanny." She's gone. I can't find her. I've looked everywhere, Anne. Marcus's blood went cold. What do you mean she's gone? She was in her playroom 20 minutes ago. I went to get her dinner, and when I came back, her voice broke. The door was open. She's not in the building. Security is searching, but... Have you called Miss Halston? She's in a meeting downtown. I left 3 messages. I don't know what to. Call her again. Keep calling until she answers. Marcus was already moving, shoving his phone into his pocket as he ran toward the stairs. I'm going to find her. Where? Where would she? But Marcus had already hung up. Victoria's phone buzzed for the 4th time during the investor presentation. She'd silenced it after the second call, but now it was vibrating so insistently that the CEO sitting beside her glanced over with raised eyebrows. She excused herself and stepped into the hallway. 7 missed calls. 3 voicemails. A dozen texts. Her heart stopped before she even read the first one. Lily is missing. The phone slipped from her hand. She caught it, fumbling, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. She called Diane back with shaking fingers. Where is she? Victoria's voice was barely controlled. We don't know. Security is checking cameras, but... How long has she been gone? Maybe 30 minutes. I'm so sorry, Miss Halston, I only looked away for... Victoria hung up and dialed the next number. The one she shouldn't have thought of first but did anyway. Marcus answered on the first ring. I'm already looking, he said before she could speak. Where? Victoria was running now, toward the elevator, toward her car, toward anything that would get her closer to her daughter. Where would she go? The old research building. Where your husband worked. Victoria stopped. That building's been closed for 2 years. How would she even? She'd find a way. Marcus's voice was steady, certain. That's where the last pieces of him are. That's where she'd go. Victoria's chest tightened. I'm 10 minutes away. I'll find her, Marcus said. I promise. The line went dead. The old Halston research facility sat on the edge of the industrial district, a relic from the company's early days before they'd moved operations to the tower downtown. The building was dark, its windows boarded up, its parking lot cracked and overgrown with weeds. Marcus stood at the front entrance, the chain-link fence bent just enough for a small child to slip through. Lily? His voice echoed across the empty lot. No answer. He squeezed through the gap and approached the main doors. One of them hung slightly ajar, the lock broken. Fresh scuff marks in the dust. She'd been here. Marcus pulled the door open and stepped inside. The air was thick and stale, heavy with the smell of old paper and abandonment. Emergency lights flickered weakly in the hallway, casting long shadows across the walls. Desks sat covered in dust. Filing cabinets stood with drawers half open, their contents long since removed. White boards still bore faded equations and diagrams from meetings held years ago. It felt like walking through a tomb. Lily? Marcus called again, his voice swallowed by the emptiness. Nothing. He moved deeper into the building, past empty cubicles and darkened conference rooms. His footsteps crunched on broken glass. Somewhere above, a pipe dripped steadily, the sound impossibly loud in the silence. Then he heard it. A soft, hiccuping sob. Marcus followed the sound down a narrow corridor to a corner office. The nameplate beside the door was tarnished but still readable, Robert Halston, Chief Innovation Officer. The door was open. Inside, the office was frozen in time. A desk covered in dust. Bookshelves lined with technical manuals. A framed photo of Victoria, Robert, and Lily at a beach, all 3 of them laughing. And under the desk, curled up in the shadows, was a small figure clutching a crocheted bluebird. Lily, Marcus whispered. She looked up, her face streaked with tears, her eyes red and swollen. She didn't speak. Just stared at him like she wasn't sure if he was real. Marcus knelt down slowly, carefully, a few feet from the desk. He didn't reach for her. Didn't try to pull her out. He just stayed there, letting her see him. "Hey, buddy," he said softly. "You scared a lot of people tonight." Lily's lip trembled. "I didn't mean to." "I know." Marcus's voice was gentle. "Can you tell me why you came here?" For a long moment, Lily didn't answer. Then, in a voice so small it was almost inaudible, she whispered, "I don't want to forget his voice." Marcus's chest tightened. "I used to remember it," Lily continued, her words spilling out now, desperate and broken. "I used to hear it in my head all the time. When he'd say goodnight. When he'd call me Lily Bug. But now," her voice cracked. "Now it's getting quieter. And I'm scared that one day I won't remember it at all." Tears slid down her cheeks. This was his office. He used to bring me here sometimes. I thought maybe if I came back, I could hear him again. But he's not here. He's not anywhere. Marcus felt his own eyes burning. He thought about Tommy. About the way his son's laugh used to fill their house. About how that sound had faded over time, no matter how hard he tried to hold on to it. "Lily," he said quietly, "can I tell you something?" She nodded, still clutching the bird. "When my son died," Marcus began, his voice thick, "I was terrified of the same thing. I thought if I forgot what he sounded like, it would be like losing him all over again. So I held on to everything. His toys. His clothes. Even the videos on my phone. I played them over and over until I could recite every word." Lily watched him, her eyes wide. "But here's what I learned," Marcus continued. "The voice fades. The memories get softer. And that's okay. Because the love doesn't fade. The love stays. It lives in here." He pressed his hand to his chest. "Your dad's voice might get quieter, but everything he taught you, everything he gave you, all the ways he loved you, that stays. Forever." "How do you know?" Lily's voice was barely a whisper. "Because my son's been gone for 3 years, and I still feel him with me every single day. Not because I remember his voice perfectly. But because I remember how he made me feel. Safe. Loved. Important." Marcus's voice broke. "Your dad made you feel that way too, didn't he?" Lily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Then he's still with you," Marcus said gently. "He'll always be with you. You don't have to be afraid of forgetting, because the most important parts. Those never leave." Lily stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she crawled out from under the desk and into Marcus's arms. He held her carefully, feeling her small body shake with sobs, and let her cry until she had nothing left. Victoria found them 10 minutes later. She burst through the office door, her face pale, her breath ragged from running through the building. When she saw Lily safe in Marcus's arms, her knees nearly gave out. "Oh my God." She crossed the room in 3 strides and dropped to the floor beside them, her hands reaching for her daughter. "Lily. Baby. You're okay. You're okay." Lily turned and threw her arms around her mother, and Victoria held her so tightly it was as if she could physically keep her from ever disappearing again. "I'm sorry, Mommy," Lily sobbed. "I'm sorry. I just wanted to hear him." "I know. I know, sweetheart." Victoria's voice shattered. "I miss him too, God, I miss him so much." And then, for the first time since Robert's death, Victoria let herself break. She buried her face in her daughter's hair and wept, deep, wrenching sobs that she'd been holding back for 3 months. All the strength, all the control, all the armor she'd built to survive, it all came crashing down in that dusty, abandoned office. Marcus started to stand, to give them space, but Victoria reached out and grabbed his hand. "Don't," she whispered, her eyes pleading. "Please. Stay." So he did. The three of them sat together on the floor of Robert Halston's old office, surrounded by dust and memories and ghosts. A grieving widow. A broken father. A little girl trying to survive the impossible. And in that moment, something shifted. They weren't just connected by circumstance anymore. They were bound by something deeper. By survival. By understanding. By the shared weight of loss and the fragile hope that maybe, together, they could find a way to carry it. Victoria looked at Marcus, her face wet with tears, and mouthed two words, "Thank you." Marcus nodded, his throat too tight to speak. And Lily, still holding the crocheted bluebird, whispered into the silence, "Can we go home now?" "Yeah, sweetheart," Victoria said, pressing a kiss to her daughter's forehead. "Let's go home." They stood together, the three of them, and walked out of the darkness. Outside, the city lights glittered in the distance. And for the first time in a long time, the night didn't feel quite so heavy. The morning after they found Lily, Victoria sat in her office staring at a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. Outside, the city was waking up, traffic humming, construction crews starting their shifts, the world moving forward the way it always did, indifferent to the small miracles that happened in the spaces between catastrophe. Her assistant knocked softly. "Miss Halston. Mr. Lane is here." Victoria straightened, smoothing down her blazer even though it didn't need smoothing. "Send him in." Marcus stepped through the door looking like he'd barely slept. His janitorial uniform had been replaced with jeans and a plain gray sweater. He held his baseball cap in his hands, turning it nervously. "You wanted to see me? Sit. Please." Victoria gestured to the chair across from her desk, then seemed to reconsider. She stood and moved to the small seating area by the window, 2 couches, a coffee table, less formal. Less like a business meeting. Marcus followed, sitting on the edge of the couch like he might need to leave quickly. Victoria studied him for a moment, and he shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. "I'm not firing you," she said finally. "In case that's what you're worried about." A flicker of relief crossed his face. "Okay. I wanted to talk about what happens next." Victoria leaned forward, her hands clasped between her knees. "Last night, when I found you with Lily, you weren't just keeping her safe. You were reaching her. In a way I haven't been able to. In a way no one has." Marcus looked down at his hands. "I just told her the truth. That's exactly my point." Victoria's voice softened. "Everyone else has been treating her like she's fragile. Like she'll shatter if we say the wrong thing. But you talked to her like she could handle it. Like she was strong enough to carry the weight." "She is strong enough," Marcus said quietly. "Stronger than she knows." Victoria felt her throat tighten. "These past few days, I've been watching her. Really watching. And she's different. She came down to breakfast this morning and asked me about the birds outside the window. Asked me their names." Her voice cracked. "She hasn't asked me a question in 3 months." Marcus's expression softened. "Yesterday afternoon," Victoria continued, "she drew a picture. First time since Robert died. It was just a house and some trees, nothing elaborate, but she drew something. She's starting to come back, Marcus. And it's because of you." "It's because she's ready," Marcus said. I don't know. Someone who understands what she's going through." Victoria nodded slowly. "Tell me about him." "Your son." Marcus went still. "Ma'am." "Victoria. Please." She met his eyes. "You've seen the worst of my life. You've held my daughter while she fell apart. I think we're past formalities." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his fingers still turning the cap in his hands. Then, softly, he began. Tommy was 6 when he died. Same age as Lily when she lost her dad. He swallowed hard. He was God, he was the best kid. So curious about everything. Used to ask a million questions. Dad, why is the sky blue? Dad, where do squirrels sleep? Dad, can we build a rocket ship? A small, painful smile crossed his face. I taught art at the high school, so I was always making things. And Tommy, he collected everything I made him. Bottle cap boats. Yarn animals. Popsicle stick airplanes. He'd line them up on his shelf like they were treasure. Marcus's voice thickened. The day he died, I'd given him a paper crane that morning. Told him it was for good luck. He stopped, his jaw clenching. Victoria waited, giving him space. He had it in his pocket when the truck hit him. Marcus finally continued, his voice barely above a whisper. The paramedics gave it back to me at the hospital. It was crushed. Covered in blood. And I kept thinking, what kind of luck was that? Marcus. I blamed myself for a long time. Still do, some days. If I'd driven him to school. If I'd walked him to the bus stop. If I'd he broke off, shaking his head. My wife couldn't look at me after. Every time she saw me, she saw him. Saw everything we'd lost. So she left. And I don't blame her. I could barely look at myself either. Victoria's eyes glistened. Is that why you took the janitorial job? Marcus nodded. I needed to disappear. Needed to not be Marcus Lane, the guy who lost his son. I just wanted to be nobody. Invisible. He looked up at her. But then your daughter found me. And she looked at me like she knew. Like she could see straight through all the walls I'd built. And suddenly I wasn't invisible anymore. You saved her life, Victoria said softly. No, Marcus shook his head. She saved mine. They sat in silence for a moment, two people who'd learned that survival sometimes looks nothing like strength, sometimes it looks like simply getting up every morning and deciding not to give up. Finally, Victoria spoke. I have a proposition for you. Marcus looked at her warily. I want to create a new position, she said. A grief support program for children who've experienced trauma. We'd start with Lily, but eventually expand it. Therapy, creative outlets, mentorship. A safe space for kids like her. Victoria paused. I want you to run it. Marcus stared at her. I'm not qualified. You're more qualified than anyone I know. Victoria's voice was firm. You understand grief. You understand loss. And more importantly, you understand how to sit with someone in their pain without trying to fix it. That's not something you learn in a textbook. The board will never approve. I don't care what the board approves. Victoria's eyes flashed. This is my company. My daughter. And my decision. Marcus opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He looked out the window at the city below, at all those lives moving forward, and thought about Tommy. About the toys he still made at night. About the way Lily held the crocheted bird like it was a lifeline. What would I even call it? He asked quietly. Victoria smiled, and for the first time in months, it reached her eyes. I was thinking. Tommy's wing. Marcus's breath caught. A space dedicated to your son, Victoria continued. Where his memory helps other children survive their grief. Where something beautiful comes from something broken. Marcus covered his face with his hands, and his shoulders shook. Victoria moved to sit beside him, placing a gentle hand on his arm. Not a CEO and an employee. Just two parents trying to find meaning in the wreckage. Thank you, Marcus whispered. Thank you, Victoria said. For giving my daughter a reason to keep fighting. For giving me hope. And in that moment, sitting in the quiet of her office with the morning light streaming through the windows, something shifted between them. Not romance. Not attraction. But something deeper, a recognition of shared pain, of mutual survival, of two people who'd been drowning separately and had somehow found a way to keep each other afloat. They were becoming something Victoria hadn't expected. A family built not on blood, but on understanding. But not everyone saw it that way. That afternoon, Edward Crane called an emergency board meeting. 7 members gathered in the conference room, their expressions ranging from concern to hostile. "She's lost her mind," Crane said flatly, sliding a document across the table. "This is the proposal Victoria submitted this morning. A new department. A 6-figure budget. And at the head of it, a janitor with no credentials, no experience, and a history of mental instability." "That's a bit harsh," Margaret Chen interjected. "The man lost his child. Which is exactly why he shouldn't be working with traumatized children." Crane's voice rose. "He's not a therapist. He's not a counselor. He's a custodian who makes toys out of garbage and somehow convinced Victoria that he's qualified to run a program that could expose this company to massive liability." "The girl has improved," someone pointed out. "Even the skeptics can't deny that." "One child," Crane shot back, "one anecdotal success does not justify this level of risk. What happens when the next child doesn't respond? When a parent sues us for negligence? When the media turns this into a story about a billionaire CEO who valued sentimentality over safety?" The room fell silent. "I'm calling for a vote," Crane said coldly. "To block this program. To remove Marcus Lane from any position involving Lily Halston. And if necessary, to remove Victoria from active decision-making until she's psychologically fit to lead." Several board members shifted uncomfortably. "That's extreme," Chen said. "So is what she's doing." Crane leaned forward, his eyes hard. "We have a responsibility to this company. To our shareholders. To the thousands of employees whose livelihoods depend on us making sound decisions. And right now, Victoria Halston is not making sound decisions." He straightened, looking around the table. "All in favor of blocking the program and removing Marcus Lane?" 3 hands rose. Then a 4th. Then a 5th. Crane smiled coldly. "Motion carries. We'll present it to Victoria tomorrow." 3 floors above, Victoria sat with Lily in the private playroom. Her daughter was drawing again, her small hand moving carefully across the page. On the paper, 3 figures stood together under a tree. A woman. A girl. And a man holding something small. In the corner of the drawing, barely visible, was another figure. A boy with a gap-toothed smile. "Who's that?" Victoria asked gently. "Tommy," Lily said simply. "Uncle Marcus's son. He's watching over us." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. And somewhere below, Marcus Lane pushed his cleaning cart through the empty lobby, unaware that a storm was coming. Unaware that the battle for Tommy's wing, and for the fragile family they were building, was about to begin. Victoria was in a strategy meeting when her assistant appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "Ms. Halston, the board is requesting your immediate presence in the main conference room." Victoria glanced at her watch. "I didn't have a board meeting scheduled. It's an emergency session." They invoked Article 7. The room went silent. Article 7 allowed the board to call mandatory meetings without the CEO's consent, a provision designed for crisis situations. Victoria had never seen it used in her 12 years with the company. She stood, her expression unreadable. "Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes." When Victoria entered the conference room, all 7 board members were already seated. Edward Crane sat at the head of the table where Victoria usually sat. A power play. She took the only empty seat, at the far end, like a defendant facing judgment. "Thank you for joining us," Crane said, his tone dripping with false courtesy. We'll get straight to the point. The board has voted to block your proposal for the child grief program, effective immediately. Victoria's jaw tightened. On what grounds? On the grounds that it represents an unacceptable risk to this company. Crane slid a folder across the table. We've also voted to terminate Marcus Lane's employment and to bar him from any further contact with your daughter on company premises. Victoria didn't touch the folder. You can't do that. We just did. Crane leaned back in his chair. Victoria, we understand you're grieving. We understand you're desperate to help Lily. But your judgment has become compromised. This man is not qualified to work with traumatized children, and your insistence on elevating him to a position of authority is putting this entire company at risk. He's helping my daughter, Victoria said, her voice dangerously quiet. One child, Crane shot back. And what happens when he fails with the next one? When a lawsuit comes? When the media turns this into a circus? He gestured to the other board members. We have a fiduciary responsibility to protect this company. And right now, you're the biggest threat to it. Margaret Chin spoke up, her voice gentle but firm. Victoria, we're not trying to hurt you. But we need you to step back and see this objectively. Marcus Lane is a janitor with no credentials, no training, and a documented history of depression following his son's death. Putting him in charge of vulnerable children is negligent at best. He understands grief better than any therapist I've hired, Victoria said. Understanding grief doesn't qualify someone to treat it, another board member interjected. Would you let someone perform surgery just because they'd survived cancer? This isn't surgery. It might as well be. Crane's voice cut through the room. You're playing with children's mental health. With the company's reputation. With shareholder value. And we won't allow it. Victoria stood slowly, her hands pressed flat against the table. Let me be very clear about something. Marcus Lane stays. The program moves forward. And if any of you have a problem with that, you can tender your resignation. The room erupted. You can't just override the board. This is reckless. Victoria, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. Her voice rang out, silencing them. For 3 months, I watched my daughter disappear. 6 professionals failed her. Specialists failed her. I failed her. And then a janitor who understood loss gave her a reason to speak again. So yes, I'm putting him in charge of a program. And yes, I'm doing it whether you approve or not. Crane stood, his expression cold. Then we'll have no choice but to call for a vote of no confidence. If you proceed with this, we will remove you as CEO. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Victoria met his gaze, unflinching. Do what you have to do. But Marcus Lane stays. She walked out, leaving the board in stunned silence. By that evening, the story had leaked. Halston board moves to remove CEO over controversial janitor billionaire's grief clouds judgment, insiders say. Is Victoria Halston fit to lead? The headlines were everywhere. Financial networks dissected her decision-making. Business analysts questioned her stability. Social media exploded with opinions from people who'd never met her, never met Marcus, never met Lily. Victoria's phone rang constantly. Investors demanding explanations. Reporters requesting interviews. PR firms offering crisis management. She ignored all of it. Instead, she sat in Lily's playroom, watching her daughter arrange a collection of small objects Marcus had given her, stones, bottle caps, bits of driftwood. Each one with a story. Mommy? Lily looked up. Why are people being mean about Uncle Marcus? Victoria's chest tightened. Because sometimes people don't understand things that are different. But he's not different. He's just nice. I know, sweetheart. Lily was quiet for a moment, then said something that made Victoria's heart stop. Can I tell them he's nice? The next morning, Dr. Sarah Chen arrived for Lily's weekly evaluation. She was the 8th therapist Victoria had hired, and the first one Lily had actually agreed to see, mostly because Marcus had suggested it might help. Dr. Chen sat across from Lily in the playroom, her notebook open but untouched. "How are you feeling today, Lily?" Lily looked at the crocheted bird in her hands. "Better than before." "That's good. Can you tell me what's making you feel better?" "Uncle Marcus." Dr. Chen nodded carefully. "And what does Uncle Marcus do that helps?" Lily thought about it, her small face serious. "He makes the sad days less scary." Dr. Chen leaned forward slightly. "How does he do that?" "He tells me it's okay to be sad. That I don't have to be brave all the time. And he tells me stories about people who were scared but kept going anyway." Lily's voice was steady, clear. "He understands what it feels like when someone you love goes away and doesn't come back." "Because of his son," Dr. Chen said gently. Lily nodded. "Tommy. He's in heaven with my daddy now. Uncle Marcus says they're probably friends." Dr. Chen's professional composure cracked just slightly. She wrote something in her notebook, then looked at Lily. "Would you be comfortable if I shared what you just told me with some other people? People who want to understand why Uncle Marcus is important to you?" Lily looked at her mother. Victoria nodded encouragingly. "Okay," Lily said. "Because he is important. And people should know." 2 days later, Victoria stood at a podium in the Halston Tower Conference Center, facing a room full of reporters. Cameras lined the back wall. Microphones crowded the podium. Every major news outlet in the city had sent someone. Victoria's hands gripped the edges of the podium, steady despite the storm raging inside her. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "I'm here to address the recent media coverage regarding my daughter, Marcus Lane, and the new program I've proposed for Halston Enterprises." Flashbulbs popped. Reporters leaned forward. 3 months ago, my husband died in a helicopter crash. My daughter, Lily, witnessed the aftermath of that loss in ways no 7-year-old should have to. She stopped speaking. Stopped engaging. 6 professional therapists tried to reach her. All of them failed. Victoria paused, her voice steady but heavy with emotion. Then a janitor named Marcus Lane knelt down beside her in our lobby and gave her a handmade toy. And she spoke for the first time in 90 days. Murmurs rippled through the room. "Now, many of you have questioned my judgment. You've questioned Marcus's qualifications. You've questioned whether a man with no formal training should be allowed anywhere near traumatized children." Victoria's eyes swept the room. "And I understand those concerns. But let me ask you something, when did we decide that credentials matter more than compassion? When did we decide that degrees matter more than understanding?" Her voice grew stronger. "Marcus Lane lost his 6-year-old son 3 years ago. That he knows what grief looks like from the inside. He knows what it means to survive something that should have destroyed you. And he knows how to sit with a child in pain without trying to fix them, just be with them." "Ms. Halston," a reporter called out, "are you saying professional training doesn't matter?" "I'm saying it's not the only thing that matters," Victoria shot back. "My daughter didn't need another diagnosis. She needed someone who understood. And Marcus gave her that." Another reporter, "What about the liability? The risk to your company?" "Some things are worth the risk," Victoria said firmly. "My daughter's life is worth the risk. And if creating a program that helps children like her costs me my position, my reputation, or my company, then so be it. Because at the end of the day, I'm not just a CEO. I'm a mother. And I will not abandon my daughter or the man who saved her." The room erupted with questions, but Victoria raised a hand. "One more thing," she said. "I'm formally announcing the creation of Tommy's Wing, a grief support program for children experiencing trauma and loss. Marcus Lane will lead it. And will launch in 30 days, with or without board approval. She stepped away from the podium as the room exploded. Marcus watched the press conference from his apartment, his heart pounding. He saw himself in the headlines. Saw his name attached to something that mattered. For 3 years, he'd been invisible. Now he was standing in the light. And he realized something profound: he wasn't just surviving anymore. He was protecting someone. Helping someone. Saving someone. Just like he'd once saved Tommy from nightmares and scraped knees and bad days at school. He was a father again. Not to Lily, she had a mother who loved her fiercely. But a protector. A guide. Someone who could show her that survival was possible. His phone rang. "Victoria. Did you see it?" she asked. "Yeah. I have an idea," she said. "Something bold. Can you meet me tomorrow morning?" "Of course." Victoria paused, then said quietly, "Thank you, Marcus. For not running when this got hard." "Thank you," Marcus replied, "for not letting me." The line went quiet, but neither of them hung up. Two people who'd lost everything, building something new from the wreckage. And tomorrow, they'd fight for it together. The space Victoria chose for Tommy's wing was on the ground floor of Halston Tower, tucked away from the corporate hustle but filled with natural light. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a small garden that had been neglected for years. Marcus spent 2 weeks transforming it, painting walls in soft blues and greens, building low shelves, creating quiet corners with bean bags and blankets. He worked mostly alone, his hands remembering the familiar rhythm of creation. But he wasn't building just a room. He was building a sanctuary. A place where broken things could exist without needing to be fixed. On the day before the opening, Victoria found him sitting on the floor, arranging handmade toys on a shelf. Crocheted animals. Painted stones. Bottle-cap boats. Each one crafted late at night when the grief got too heavy to sleep. "It's beautiful," Victoria said softly from the doorway. Marcus looked up, exhaustion evident in his eyes but something else there too, something that looked almost like hope. "I keep thinking, what if I can't do this? What if the next kid doesn't respond the way Lily did?" Victoria stepped inside and sat down beside him on the floor, her expensive suit wrinkling against the paint-splattered drop cloth. "Then you'll sit with them anyway. That's all anyone needs sometimes. Someone willing to stay." Marcus nodded slowly. "Tommy would have loved this place." "I know," Victoria said. "That's why his name belongs here." The next morning, Marcus stood at the entrance of Tommy's wing wearing khakis and a button-down shirt that felt too formal, too visible. His hands trembled slightly as he straightened the small wooden sign beside the door. "Tommy's wing, a place for hearts that are learning to heal." "Uncle Marcus?" He turned to find Lily standing behind him, holding the crocheted bluebird. She wore a yellow dress and had clipped her hair back with butterfly pins. She looked nervous too. "Hey, buddy," Marcus said, kneeling down to her level. "You ready?" Lily nodded, then hesitated. "What if they don't like me?" "They will," Marcus said gently. "But even if they're shy at first, that's okay. Some people need time. We'll give them as much as they need." Lily considered this, then slipped her small hand into his. "Will you stay with me?" "Every single minute," Marcus promised. The first child arrived at 10 o'clock. A boy named Daniel, 8 years old, whose father had died in a car accident 6 months earlier. He stood in the doorway clutching his mother's hand, his eyes wary, his shoulders hunched like he was trying to make himself smaller. Marcus didn't approach. He just sat on the floor near the window, arranging colorful stones in a pattern, and waited. Lily sat beside him, quiet and still. After 5 long minutes, Daniel's curiosity won. He let go of his mother's hand and took 3 careful steps forward. "What are those?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Marcus looked up as if he'd just noticed the boy. "Oh, these? These are memory stones. Each one holds something important. See this blue one? That's for the ocean. And this gray one? That's for rainy days when everything feels heavy. Daniel crept closer. Do they really hold memories? Only if you want them to, Marcus said. Sometimes it helps to have something you can touch when the memories feel too big to carry alone. Daniel stared at the stones for a long moment. Then he sat down. Not close. Not touching. Just, present. Lily offered him the crocheted bird without a word. Daniel took it carefully, like it was something precious. And for the first time in months, Daniel's mother saw her son's shoulders relax. By the end of the first month, 7 children had joined Tommy's wing. Each one carrying their own impossible weight. Each one learning, slowly, that they weren't alone. There was Maya, 5 years old, whose older brother had drowned. She didn't speak for the first 2 weeks, just colored endless pictures of water in shades of blue and black. Marcus sat with her every day, never asking questions, just offering new colors when she ran out. There was Christopher, 10, whose mother had died of cancer. He was angry, at the world, at God, at every adult who told him, time heals all wounds. Marcus let him be angry. Let him throw pillows across the room and yell about how unfair everything was. And when Christopher finally collapsed, exhausted and crying, Marcus just said, "You're right. It is unfair. And I'm sorry." There was Emma, 6, who'd lost her father in a fire. She collected Marcus's handmade toys like treasures, lining them up on the windowsill and naming each one. "This is Hope," she'd say, holding up a yarn rabbit. "This is Brave. This is Tomorrow." And there was Lily, who slowly transformed from the girl who couldn't speak to the girl who welcomed others into their shared pain. She held Daniel's hand during his first week when he cried for his father. She showed Maya how Marcus made the stone patterns. She told Christopher about the night she'd hidden in her father's office, searching for his voice. She became their bridge. Their reminder that survival was possible. Victoria watched from the doorway sometimes, stunned by what she was witnessing. This wasn't therapy in any traditional sense. There were no diagnoses, no treatment plans, no clinical language. Just Marcus, sitting with children in their grief, showing them that the pain wouldn't disappear but it could become bearable. And slowly, impossibly, something like healing began to grow. One afternoon, 6 weeks after Tommy's wing opened, Lily sat at the art table working on a drawing. She'd been at it for over an hour, her tongue poking out in concentration the way it used to when Robert was alive. When she finished, she brought it to Victoria. "I made this for you," Lily said. Victoria took the paper carefully. On it, drawn in careful crayon strokes, were 3 figures standing together under a large tree. A woman with dark hair. A girl with a yellow dress holding a blue bird. And a man with kind eyes and gentle hands. In the corner, smaller but no less important, was another figure. A boy with a gap-toothed smile, watching over them all. "That's us," Lily explained, pointing. "You, me, and Uncle Marcus. And that's Tommy. He's part of our family too, even though we can't see him." Victoria's vision blurred. "Lily, sweetheart. We're a family now, right?" Lily looked up at her mother with eyes that were still sad but no longer hollow. Not the same family as before. But still a family. Victoria pulled her daughter close, pressing her face into Lily's hair so she wouldn't see her mother crying. "Yes, baby. We're a family." That evening, after the children had all gone home and Tommy's wing sat quiet in the golden light of sunset, Victoria found Marcus in the garden. He was watering the plants they'd put in, wildflowers and herbs, things that could survive with minimal care but still brought beauty to the space. She didn't say anything at first, just stood beside him, watching the way the light caught the water droplets. "I was thinking today," Victoria finally said, "about how heavy everything felt 3 months ago. Like I was drowning and couldn't remember how to swim. Marcus nodded, still focused on the plants. Does it still feel that way? No, Victoria said softly. It still hurts. I still miss him every single day. But it doesn't feel like drowning anymore. It feels like I'm learning to float. Marcus smiled slightly, remembering the story he'd told Lily about Finn the Explorer. That's good. You taught me that, Victoria said, turning to look at him. You and Lily both. You taught me that surviving doesn't mean being okay. It just means choosing to stay. Marcus met her eyes, and something passed between them, understanding, gratitude, shared exhaustion, and the fragile hope that maybe tomorrow would be a little easier. Thank you, Victoria whispered. For staying. For not giving up on her. On us. Thank you, Marcus replied, for seeing me. For giving me a reason to stop being invisible. They stood together in the garden as the sun set over the city, two people who'd lost everything building something new from the ruins. Sunday morning arrived cool and clear, the kind of autumn day that felt like a gift. Marcus picked up Lily and Victoria at 8 o'clock, and they drove to Riverside Park, the same park where Marcus used to bring Tommy, though he hadn't been back since the accident. Lily ran ahead to the swings, her laughter carrying on the breeze. Push me, Uncle Marcus. Marcus jogged over and gave her a gentle push, then another, watching as she rose higher into the morning air. Her hair flew behind her. Her face tilted toward the sun. Higher, she called, and Marcus pushed harder, his heart both aching and full. Victoria stood a few feet away, her arms wrapped around herself, watching them. Marcus caught her eye and smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached all the way to something broken inside and made it hurt a little less. Lily jumped off the swing mid-arc, landing in the soft grass with a laugh. Mom! Your turn. Oh, I don't think. Please. Victoria looked at Marcus, who gestured toward the empty swing. Come on. When's the last time you did something just because? Victoria hesitated, then sat down on the swing, gripping the chains like she'd forgotten how. Marcus stepped behind her and pushed gently. And for the first time in months, Victoria Halston laughed. Not a polite laugh. Not a professional laugh. A real one, surprised and light and free. Lily clapped her hands. You're flying, Mommy. I am. Victoria called back, and for a moment, she was just a woman on a swing, not a CEO, not a widow, not someone carrying impossible weight. Just a woman remembering what joy felt like. Marcus watched them both, these two people who'd become his family without either of them meaning to. Not through blood. Not through marriage. But through survival and compassion and the stubborn refusal to let each other drown. The sun climbed higher, warming the autumn air. Children played in the distance. Birds called from the trees. And in a small corner of Riverside Park, three broken people discovered something they'd thought they'd lost forever. The possibility of tomorrow. Because sometimes families aren't built by blood. They're built by survival, compassion, and the courage to stay when everything hurts. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to sit with someone in their darkness, you discover you're not alone in yours. Tommy's wing would grow. More children would come. More stories would be shared. But this moment, Marcus pushing Lily on a swing while Victoria watched with soft, grateful eyes, this was the moment everything changed. Not because the pain disappeared. But because they'd learned to carry it together. And that made all the difference. The story ends but the healing continues because within each of us there is a Marcus's light, a small flicker that may lose its way but still has the power to guide someone home. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment below. What moment made your heart tremble the most? I read every comment like letters from strangers. Strangers who somehow feel close. And if you want to keep walking with stories of loss, courage and healing, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story and turn on notification bell because maybe the next story will be yours.